Welcome back to part 2 of building and fitting a mobile base to my bandsaw. The process I'm using for this build is commonly called stick welding, sometimes called arc welding, more correctly or correctly called manual metallic arc welding or shielded metallic arc welding. You'll see the acronyms MMAW for manual metallic arc welding. You'll see the shielded metallic arc welding is SMAW. Often on welding machines you'll just see the term MMA, which is manual metallic arc welding. They just cut the W off the end. Now I thought I might talk about my choice of electrodes for this build, but before we do that I need to get us all on the same page about electrode classification. A common number you'll see thrown out in relation to stick welding, particularly in the YouTube world, particularly in the United States, is 70-18. What does that mean, and is that the best? So we have the number 70-18. It's shorthand for E70-18. E stands for electrode. The 70 is actually the tensile strength of the finished weld. In this case it means 70,000 psi. The 1 and the 8, they describe collectively the positions you can use the electrode in, the nature of the flux coating or the coating on the electrode, and also whether the electrode can be used with an AC current or alternating current or direct current DC, and whether in the case of direct current it is positive or negative or both. Okay, so 1 in this case means that it can be used in all positions. The 8 refers to the flux, which is low hydrogen or hydrogen controlled iron powder, and it can be used with either AC or DC positive current. Looking at this box of welding electrodes, the classification is listed on the outside. This is an Australian made pack, and the classification shown first is the one according to the Australian and New Zealand standard, in this case E4111, and the American standard is shown immediately below, and there the classification is E6011. For the Australian New Zealand standard, recall that the 41 means the welds have a tensile strength of 410 megapascals, whilst in the American classification the 60 means the welds have a tensile strength of 60,000 psi. Again, the last two numbers mean the same in both classifications. The first one means the rod can be used in all positions, and the second one means it can be used with either AC current or DC positive current, and it has a cellulose flux. For this fabrication I've used 3 different types of electrode. The first one I've used for tacking up, and its classification is E6013, or in Australian standards E4113. So going back to what I just said, the 60 is 60,000 psi tensile strength for the weld, and the 41 of course in the Australian classification is 410 megapascals tensile strength for the weld. E6013 is a common rod in Australia. I don't particularly like it, but it being a common rod, being probably the most common rod, it is exceedingly cheap to buy. So it has its purpose. It is a rod you can use in all positions. It works reasonably well, but it doesn't produce a very big weld, and also it is very prone to slag inclusions. And that's a little spot of weld, a little spot of slag in your weld, and the Lord only knows if there's one below the surface that you can't see, or an X-ray technician might know. But the rod I actually prefer to use, I just don't have in 1/8 or 3.2mm size, which is an E6012, 6012 for tacker, and so I do have the remnants of a box of 6013s, and that's what I've used here. To weld out, I've used two rods. One is 7018. We've already discussed 7018. I'm using 7018 for uphill welding while still in position. The other rod I'm using is 7024, or in Australian standards 4824, 48 being 480 megapascals. The 24, the 2 means that it can only be used in the down position. So it's used for flat welds or a fillet weld, horizontal fillet weld. Not used vertically, not used overhead. It has iron powder in the flux, and I don't know how well you can see this, but this one is a 7018 and this one's a 7024. It's a much thicker flux coating. The beauty of the 7024 is that you can weld quite rapidly with it, and that's good. And also, when you have a gap, it fills it very readily. One of the problems I did when I cut out the joints here is that I provided too much clearance to the bottom angle, and I was left with some reasonable gaps. So rather than waste it on 7018, I got out some 7024s. Easily fills the gap. For the other joints, it was a good fit up. I went for an electrode that I can use in all positions, and in this particular case, vertically up, and that's the 7018. So that's my choice. Now, 7018 is a low hydrogen rod. It needs to be stored correctly. It needs to be cooked if it gets any sort of moisture. And any sort of moisture, I'm in Queensland, Australia, we've got moisture everywhere. For you Americans, it's like living in Florida. So, special precautions is I only take one out if I'm only going to use one. If I'm going to use two, I take two out. I don't pull out the box and leave it on the bench. I don't actually store them in the box. I've got special storage area for them. If you don't need to use 7018 for this sort of build, it's not that critical. It's not a critical job. It is structural steel, but it's a minor structure. It's a bandsaw base. Not a big deal. If I had them in 1/8 or 3.2mm rods, I would use 6012. I just don't have any here at the moment. I'm not going to buy them especially for this job. So these do the job fine. Bear in mind that a 7018, if it's left out on the bench or just in the an open box, it's pretty well no longer low hydrogen. And I just hope you find that useful. I have designed the base so that the casters are on the outside of the frame and with a defined direction for the wheel travel. This direction is set so the wheels are side on to the direction of cutting on the bandsaw with the fixed casters at the rear. This arrangement is designed to prevent rocking when the wood is being sawn and enables the bandsaw to be easily pushed from the rear, as well as being easy to position in storage. To make sure that I get it right, I've used a soapstone or welder's chalk to mark the forward direction of travel on the frame. The caster mounting plates have a direction in that the XY dimensions of the hole pattern differ, with the narrower dimension identifying the cross holes for the fixed caster. I have also marked this direction with the soapstone. I then position the wheel mount on the cross member, clamping it in place and measuring and massaging with my chipping hammer to position the plate central to the outrigger. Once the mounting plate is central to the cross member, I make further small adjustments to ensure the line of the mounting holes is at a right angle to the side member. This is because the welding has produced a slight forward bend in the outrigger, but I want the fixed wheels to run true to the side member. Before welding each caster mount, I screw a bolt into each of the 4 tapped holes. This prevents weld spatter getting stuck to the hole's internal thread. Having got a good fit up this time, I'm using 70-18 electrodes to weld the mount to the frame, leaving the clamp in place until I've finished welding out the plate. With the welding of the caster mounts all finished, the frame is ready to go for paint. Paint will of course cover up the chalk mark signifying direction. So I use a cold chisel and a hammer to put a direction arrow at the rear of the frame. Back from paint, it is time to fit the casters. I used thread locker compound on each of the bolts as well as fitting them with the flat washer. I will start with the rotating casters at the front of the frame. Just a drop of thread locker compound on the last couple of threads of the bolt is all that is needed. The bolts were tightened up with a 13mm spanner and the caster rotated to check that the caster to bolt head clearance was sufficient. This process was then repeated for the remaining 3 casters. With the casters in place on the mobile base, it is time to mount the bandsaw. The bandsaw is heavy, and I'm using my engine crane to lift it onto the mobile base. Off camera, before painting, I had marked and drilled holes in the base to bolt down the bandsaw stand. Finally, with the stand in position, I'm able to bolt it to the base using 8mm hex bolts fitted with nylock nuts and flat washers under both the bolt head and the nut. Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. And if you did, I would welcome a thumbs up, and please share it widely amongst your friends, even amongst people who aren't your friends. It's all good. This channel is about fixing things, it's about making things, it's about maintaining things, and it's about renovating things. And if you like that sort of stuff and you haven't already subscribed, think about subscribing. It's easy. Hit the subscribe bar down below. While you're there, don't forget to ding the bell, also down below, so that you're reminded by YouTube every time a new video comes out. Thank you.